Hey guys, what is up? AwesomeTheSauce here. Hope you guys are having a great day and welcome to a video reviewing a bunch of changes that came to the spiral last night. Now, this actually isn't a complete video on all of the changes, but what we are going to be talking about are all the spells that got changed. Now, these are actually pretty big because Storm got a massive change and so did Myth and Ice. So I think we should start off with Storm because I feel like, you know, they got the short end of the stick a lot of times, and it seems like this is one of the first few times that they actually got something that's a very big buff. It seems like the first time in a while that Storm has gotten an actual buff compared to every other school. So if you take a look at Rusulka, it's totally different than what it used to be. So it still does the same damage that it used to be, but now instead of potentially giving you a weakness or potentially giving you a blade, now it just has a small chance of giving you a blade. Now, I know a lot of people are probably wondering, how could you possibly keep the damage the same but keep the utility of the blade like basically unchanged and remove the weakness? Like, wouldn't removing the weakness reduce the damage? My theory on this is that the frequency of the blade, the positive blade, is much lower than it was in the previous spell. Now, I say this for a lot of reasons. One, a weakness, like a minus 30 weakness, is very bad compared to a plus 30 blade. It's not even close, actually. It's a very big difference. So for the weakness on the spell to not have affected this damage with the blade, that means that the frequency of the weakness was probably anywhere from 1/5 to 1/3, and the blade was probably anywhere from 80% to 66%. So now, if they remove the weakness, I think what ends up happening is that they must make the blade a much lower frequency. That's the only way I see this spell still being the same damage if it's following the audit rules. So what does that mean for Storm? That means that there's no risk to using this, and there can only be a positive gain. So that's a really good thing. But if you're using this and relying on the blade, there's a real big chance that it won't happen, and that could screw you over. Overall, though, I would argue that this meta is so much slower, so the idea of like a weakness was so much worse, because there's a lot of reasons for this. One, Storm can't bubble control even close to as easily as other schools, right? They can Dark Wind, but they do not have a trainable hit and bubble. Considering that chances are you're not really going to get bubbled that easily as a Storm, a weakness is very bad in the sense that you can't overpower it with a bubble as easily. That's one thing. The other thing is that even though shadow rating has not changed, the rate at which you get shads has changed. So every shadow rating gives you less shads, basically. So the number has stayed the same, but the effect of it is a lot lower. So what it used to be is that you would get like a shad every like 4 rounds, but now it's clearly much slower. So if you get a weakness, the chances that you have another shadow hit that's a very powerful hit for a few pips to make up for the weakness is also lower. So in my opinion, this was a very needed change. I'm glad that this is a thing. I would always rather just have this without the blade than have this with the weakness at all times. You know, dude, like, I don't even care that much about the secondary effect. Just the fact that it can't hurt you. It can't put you a turn behind because you're using a shad hit, you know? Like, this is an extremely good thing for Storm. Now, you thought I would stop there, right? But no, Storm got another insane change. If you happen to have these, you're in luck because they made Storm Beetle. They turned it from literally not being able to be used to in PvP at all to now it's a 2-pip spell that hits and then blades. Now, this is really good for a lot of reasons. One, any 2-pip hit and buff isn't really going to give you tempo, right? If it was a 1-pip hit and buff, like the actual, like, you know, the item card, for example, then you could argue, oh, unlimited copies of this is a little crazy because you can keep pip conserving. You can essentially break a shield, get a buff, and gain a pip at the same time with pip conserve, and you could really gain a lot out of that. This, you can't really do that with this. This literally, like, if someone has a shield, you take away the shield and gain a buff, you barely change the tempo if they re-shield. What this is going to be really good at is it's going to be able to preserve the tempo if you have offensive pressure already. So if you're a Storm and you have maybe bubble control by some miracle, maybe you did a hit in Galvanic, right? Maybe you mutated a Phoenix and you have a Thunderbird. If you have that type of positive pressure, now, instead of a shield, especially a set shield, like if it was a regular shield, maybe you could argue, oh, you could pierce it to maintain your pressure. If it's a set shield, there's no way to maintain it other than a Storm Beetle. Now you can use this as a way to maintain positive pressure. So I'll say this, as a Storm now, your best bet is to play very fast and make sure that if you have an open shot, to preserve that for as long as possible and run your opponent out of shield. But yeah, the fact that they have this as a tool and they can't get shot in the foot by their own shadow spell, this is a really good thing for Storm. Will this put Storm back on the map? Honestly, this is probably closer to putting it on the map than the Insane Bolt change last week was. And the reason I say this is because now there's literally no risk to using this, so sometimes you gotta do that calculus in your head. Is it even worth doing this if I could lose from the weakness? Now there's no risk, right? That's amazing. And the other thing is that a set shield might not be the end of the world now. You could actually use these. Not to mention, in Beast Moon, there's apparently a new pet that also gives 2 lightning elves. So I'm pretty sure this is the one. I think it's called the Electric Elf, but if you go to this, right, it should give you 2 cards instead of 1, like a regular lightning elf. So the Electric Elf rather than the Storm Elf, it gives an extra copy from what I've heard. So it's not the same as a Storm Elf. There's another pet now called the Electric Elf. So this might actually be a way to retain elves and very limited copies of them. Now that you can actually, you know, put Storm Beetles in your side deck. So maybe the strat is to put a bunch of Storm Beetles and Pierces in your side deck, and then you don't need a pet that gives Storm Beetle cards right now, like this one, for example. And then your best bet might be to have some elves as item cards. It's a really big win-win. Now, I will say this, a Storm Beetle item card is still very, very special in the sense that it does hit and blade for 1 pip instead of 2 pips. So if you are running pip conserve or if you can fail pip, there are so many situations where this is the superior card. So this is a decision that people are going to have to make. Is it totally worth just having a bunch of these inside deck instead of, you know, having Storm Beetle? And is it now worth it to have maybe a gear set pet like this one? Or maybe even different pets like the Electric Elf or the Baby Dactyl, which gives a Stormman spell, which is a hit and bubble. There's a lot of new varieties, like there's a lot of variety now in what Storm can do. And that's really, really good. So this change wasn't just a Rusulka change. This actually does turn around Storm PvP a lot. Now, the other change that I thought was really interesting is that basically spells that do things with pips have gotten nerfed a little bit. So now if you look at them, if you look at a Lord of Winter, it does a lot less than it used to. I think the damage nerf was nearly, I think around 100 damage, maybe a little bit less. But this already got nerfed in a previous update, and it got brought back down even harder. Now, a similar thing happened with Celestial as well. So if you're a Myth Wizard, you can check it. But I'm just gonna, you know, since they're both just 10 pip spells with pip utilities, I'm gonna treat them like the same thing. I don't think either of them should have been nerfed. I feel like the utility is the only reason you would ever use them, so I feel like, I guess I'm glad they didn't change that, right? But now I feel like people are going to be even more likely just to use the TC version that does a lot more damage even when you Solar Surge it, and it also makes your target lose more pips. So I'm a little annoyed at the fact that they're still auditing all these high pip spells, but they haven't done anything about the TC versions. I think a very good example of this, for example, is Gnomes, right? Like, they're focusing on auditing these random 10 pip spells. They're literally damage nerfing Celestial Calendar and Lord of Winter, but they're not gonna do anything about the TCs. Like, right now, this spell, if you think about it, it's extremely overpowered against life still, and people still use it, and life versus life matchups boil down to this. There are people like me that do not pack this in their side deck, but there are tons of people who still do. So, I don't know. I mean, I don't really mind if the TC versions of these spells stay, but I hope that they're just, you know, they correspond to the main deck versions. That would be nice, because otherwise I don't really see the point of even continuing audits on 10 pip spells. It's the same with Sirens. They did change Afreet at least, because I think Afreet was uniquely overpowered, but I'm a little concerned about the fact that they're still focusing on main deck spells when really the treasure card variants are definitely the worst parts of it. People are literally using those over the main deck versions already, so it kind of doesn't make sense to me. Overall, y'all, I'm really excited about this update because I know it's just a very small update, but it puts Storm back on the map, and it also shows that they're probably going to take things that actually, you know, like mess around with pips a lot more seriously. So I think Mana Burn is definitely something we're going to be looking forward to being changed. I would assume that Maycast ones that, you know, manipulate pips are hopefully going to be looked at in terms of PvP as well. If their priority is to affect spells that do things with pips, I don't see why those spells aren't on the list as well. But yeah, man, Storm is definitely going to be playable again. The only concern that I really have, the negative thing I would say, is I don't know how accessible these TCs are. I hope that they become accessible. This would have been like a 10 out of 10 update for me if these were maybe like at a vendor or something. If you could buy these somewhere so that people aren't like, you know, like I assume people are already charging mass and powers for this right now. It's probably like crazy. So I don't know, you know, will we see an actually easy way to get these, or are they going to be locked behind these empower markets? That's a really good question as well. So I don't know, that's the only negative thing I have to say about this update. Other than that, I think I'm really excited for Storm, and I'm excited to see what they do with future TCs relating to the 10 pip audits, and pip stealing things like Mana Burn, Maycast Mana Burn, Maycast Outlaw's Courtesy. I'm excited to see what they do about all of those as well. Let me know what you guys think. Do you guys think Storm is going to be better off? Do you think the spell audits on Celestial Calendar and Lord of Winter make Ice or Myth that much worse? Do you think it doesn't even make a difference? Let me know what you guys are going to do with these updates in PvP. As always, drop a like if you enjoyed, leave a sub if you're new. There's tons of links in the description, including my new merch, so check that out if you haven't. As always, if someone hasn't told you you're awesome today, they doing something wrong, so stay awesome, and yeah, y'all.